Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, that's a nod. So, Laura, Patrick, we're going to present a little bit about ourselves individually and then just tell you a bit about the work that we're doing together. So Dust, I don't know who knows us or who doesn't know us. Thanks to Matt for providing the theme for today's talk. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a second. So we started in 2000, 17 years ago in Sheffield. That's a lot of work that's been done over that period of time. We're quite an interesting studio in that we educators and students and most of the people that work in Dust have either taught the other people in Dust or they've been students of people in Dust. So it's kind of it's quite an odd mix-up. We call ourselves a collective because of the way we work. We don't focus on roles, we focus on individuals and what they do and how they do those things. And we've, for the last maybe 10, 15 years, we've been trying to put in place the kind of working environment that would allow for the growth of a particular way of working. So we studied in Leeds Met in a print room. We were doing book arts and typography and things like that. As soon as we left, we recognised that that was going to be lost to us forever. We were going to be stuck in front of an Apple Mac, and that would be the life forever, really. So we were very keen on breaking that, and we set up print rooms and we set up dark rooms, and we essentially kind of maintain a way of working that would allow us to keep our hands dirty, our heads kind of moving, and the way that we think about the world quite open. I'm going to show you some work quite quickly. There's a lot of work. I can't speak about particular pieces. I just want to show you the kind of tone and the kind of activities that we get up to. If you want to come and talk about any of those pieces of work, or if you want to find out more about what we do, there's quite a few of us here. I'll ask you to stand up, please. I'm not going to be the only one that gets embarrassed. Come on, please. Every time I have to do this. Yeah. So please feel free to have a word with these people, or come and visit the studio. It's up to you. So, food has always been a theme. We're designers, we're illustrators, we're brand strategists, we're thinkers. We do lots of arts and culture work. That arts and culture work is also very focused on food. Beyond where we are now, right back in history, it was something, the kind of notions of what challenged us with the environment, what challenged us with the way that we currently live, with the themes that were kind of running very kind of strongly through how we thought and the work we did. So publications, I don't know if you've come across this, but Archive Sheffield was a publication that's particularly relevant to some of today's conversation. This was a free publication that we worked on with a number of photographers, and it was really just about documenting everyday life and the things that make life interesting. Branding work, things like arts events in the city. We still do a lot of print, traditional printmaking techniques such as letterpress, screen printing. Again, the food stuff, illustration, dark room activities, books, journals, arts journals, Corridor 8. This is something that we working with a guy called Michael Butterworth in Manchester. Lots of arts and crafts activities, and down to things like brands such as Royal Mail, lots of very well kind of known international brands that we work with. This particular piece of work, Evo, was a bit of a tipping point for us. So we were invited to launch a brand at the Green Festival in San Francisco, which was the world's biggest sustainability and environmental kind of event. And it was really the first time that we'd engaged with it in a kind of meaningful manner. And I think at that point in time, we started to get a little bit dissatisfied with what we thought design could be. I think we felt like we'd got to a point that we were getting some level of recognition for what we were doing aesthetically, but we weren't really kind of satisfying ourselves in terms of what we were doing, how design was changing things, or how design could do something more than just look pretty. which led to so what is design here to do? Led to a pretty interesting conversation for me personally. So myself and Alan, who sat at the back there, we were once in a car park somewhere, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and even though things were going all right, we recognised that dust was destined to be a bit more than that. We personally and individually, we wanted it to be more than that. And we had this conversation that if we don't get dust to become something else in the next year, we're just going to shut it down, and we're going to stop doing that and go off and do something different. And to the point of serendipity, it's just one of those things. These things happen. We were approached by a business called Benchmark to do some work. Fine, yeah, that's good. Okay, yeah. Nobody's getting out now. So literally within that year, we were approached by an organisation called Benchmark, and they were very much involved with working alongside the global food supply chain, and they'd got a framework they were talking about, which was based around this thing called 3 E's, and Laura's going to speak a little bit more about this, but essentially it was a framework of environment, ethics and economics. And what was happening was that this framework was being picked up by some very big organisations and being used in their CSR reporting, so corporate social responsibility, their sustainability reporting. And they came to us and said, we don't want to lose it, because we're in danger here of the thing that we've created just kind of leaving the room and us never getting it back again. So they asked us to brand up and create an identity for that, which we did, and this was the mark that came out of that. And that was the start of a very interesting relationship for us. So we went in there as designers, and then something kind of, I never saw this coming. We were a small studio, not particularly profitable. We were doing all right, but what happened was we were invited to become part of that organisation. So at the time when we joined, there was maybe 60, 70 people. Now, and in about maybe 4 or 5 countries. Now there's about 800 and odd people in 27 countries. So we joined with Benchmark as Dust, still operating in exactly the same way, still doing all our arts and culture activity, but more engaged with some subject matter that we'd never come across before, but we were massively interested in. We knew it was important. So I'm here talking as Dust from Benchmark Sustainability Science Division, as is Laura. And what happened was that all of a sudden, everything that we were doing before, which was about beautifying or about communicating and presenting, it took a bit of a head turn. So all of a sudden, the reality of the subject matter and that as designers that we kind of faced with just got immeasurably just much more kind of complex and heavy, in terms of dealing with it and how we work with that. I'm just using this as an example. So this is a production in a year of 5 sources of protein. We've not included everything in here. Obviously, there's all the vegetables and everything else that we, as a race, human race, kind of produce. But I'm starting off with these big numbers. So obviously, you can see that there's a lot of things here, and this is that's kind of what's happening the world over, which is fine. There's a lot of people and there's a lot of people to feed. And when I look at these numbers, I'm kind of all right with it. I get a little bit overwhelmed with the fact that there's that much life, and there's that much kind of care required to do that properly. But then, when I stick the word tons at the end of it, I start to think about it a bit more differently, and that's when it really starts to sort of hit home. So okay, let's choosing kind of one of these, 113 million tons of pig. So I've got to do some maths here, sorry. So 113 billion kilograms of pig. I'll come back to the word billion in a bit because it's a funny word for me. A pig, when it goes to slaughter, is 85 kilograms. That is exactly the same weight as me. So if you need to visualise, just look at me, please. So you've got this kind of, we can very easily sort of say, do a straight division. And then I'm left with this number. So 1,353,293,413 pigs. Now the billion word is the word that really does freak me out, because as soon as I hear a billion, I stop thinking about it. I cannot imagine a billion light years. What's the point? You know, it's kind of like, it's something that's so big and so kind of abstract that I can't put it in anything, any kind of measurable set of circumstances. And when you look at that, each pig has got its own kind of cost, its own set of consequences. So carbon emissions, land use, nutrient loading, pollution, waste, biodiversity loss, energy use, water use, livelihoods, communities, and we can't lose sight of the people that are involved in this. You know, there's the impacts and the challenges faced absolutely everywhere. And this kind of notion of a community, you know, this kind of notion of a town, this kind of notion of a body of people that are reliant on farming. Worker well-being, animal welfare, antimicrobial use, you know, that's a big one at the moment for anybody who's doesn't know much about it. It's definitely worth looking into. So back to our numbers again. You know, we've got 113. That gave us that big on pig. Now, for example, a chicken's not far off that, but a chicken doesn't weigh 85 kilograms. So if we thought about what a chicken weighs and then looked at that figure, that would be absolutely huge. This is where we are. And we know that there's this kind of notion of we're moving towards the future of food. You know, what is the future of food for us? We asked this question on Mess on the Back, and some of the answers that we got back were, are we leaning towards a plant-forward food future? Food trends will continue to come and go. The donut will die. The avocado will become basic. We need to talk about seaweed. And somebody mentioned to me earlier on about insects. Yeah, insects are very much in the conversation at the moment. So whatever the future of food looks like, we are still here. And this is the body of work that I'm absolutely passionate about. I know Laura is as well, is that whilst we're where we are, we need people to look after that. We need people to concentrate on that big list that I showed before of all the things that need, that challenges, that need solving and need dealing with. And whilst we get to the future of food, there is this transition. I think things can be done better. I strongly believe that there are aspects to how we operate that are completely inadequate, and I'm sure a lot of you do. But they're supported by the fact that there are people and there are human beings and there are mechanisms in place that make it very difficult to change. Laura, you know, the enduring link between people, animals, and our shared environment is the basic concept known as One Health. What affects one affects us all. That has never been more true than it currently is. This is where Dust met Laura. So this is where we met FAI, this is where we met Laura, and I'm going to now hand over to yourself.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, hello everybody. My name's Laura. I'm a veterinary surgeon from Sheffield actually originally, so it's really nice to be here. But I'm also a consultant at FAI Farms, and that stands for the Food Animal Initiative. And we're based, as I say, out in Oxford. The story of FAI is quite interesting as well, as the story of Dust is. And we started out in 2000. We had 3 founding directors that are still with us today. And at that time, they saw a pressing and urgent need for greater attention, really, to be paid to the way in which our food is produced. And certainly felt as well that greater transparency was required for consumers to be able to be more aware of how the food on their plate was being produced at farm level. And so FAI came to fruition. And at that time we were pretty small. We had just 2 commercial clients at that time, and we were just based on our own farm in Oxford, farming as well. So we had our wellies firmly in the dirt as well, which meant that we had that credibility with the farming community, as well as being able to advise our clients from a place of real practical farming reality. But since then, the business has grown really beyond measure. We became benchmark quite quickly after that, after FAI was established. And since then, as Pat says, we're now a company with nearly 1,000 employees across the world, in different divisions, making impacts in sustainability in lots of different sectors, from publishing through to animal health, through to nutrition, breeding and genetics, and in sustainability science. So it's really great to be part of this business. That's a very exciting place to be. But what we do is, as well as farming our own pigs and cattle, sheep and laying hens, we also provide services to a large portfolio of some of the biggest food brands in the world. And what we do for those clients is we provide strategic and policy advice on the way in which those brands source livestock products. We also perform and manage R&D projects within their supply chains. So in real terms, that means that me and my colleagues find ourselves out on farm on a regular basis, collecting data, looking at animal welfare, environmental stewardship, as well as productivity indicators on farm. And those farmers are obviously producing the food that supplies some of these biggest food brands in the world. And finally, we also provide data services for our clients. So we build cloud-based data solutions that enable us to collect sustainability indicators from these farms and allow trending and feedback to those brands about how we're performing in the supply chain. We've got lots of pictures of our own animals. And for us, what we're doing in this space is not just saying that organic farming is the best. You've got to eat local. You've got to eat organic. You've got to spend a large proportion of your paycheck every month on the food you eat. But what we're saying is that actually organic and local is fantastic. It's almost a gold standard. But the majority of our population just can't afford it. And that means what we're trying to do is raise the benchmark of the majority of the food that's on supermarket shelves. And so in raising that benchmark, we're impacting on the lives of literally millions of animals, as well as thousands and thousands of people that depend on these animals for their livelihood. And what we also do is not only work in the UK and Europe, which is obviously where most of our work sits, but we also are expanding our work into sort of lower income settings as well, which is an area of great interest, particularly to myself. But what we're doing is performing a range of admittedly smaller projects, but in parts of the world such as Sub-Saharan Africa, in Kenya, and in other parts of the world, India and Nepal as well. And what I suppose we're doing by running those projects is saying that yes, the commercial world is really important to be able to pull through impact through massive supply chains. And what we're also saying is that yes, livestock do have negative impacts on certainly on the environment, sometimes on human health as well, and certainly in terms of animal welfare. But what we're recognising is that some parts of the world simply depend on livestock for their entire livelihoods. Also for nutrition, for fertiliser, for fuel, for clothing, and also for socio-cultural identity as well. So what we're saying is that yes, we know in the Western world we do have to reduce our consumption of livestock products, but some parts of the world we can't get away from it. We actually need to increase our production of livestock and do it much better in those parts of the world because we're propping up people's lives and communities as well. So, as Pat says, everything we do is underpinned by this 3 E's framework, and I think that's something that if you can take that away from today, that'd be fantastic. It's a simple concept. Everything we do has to consider economic viability of farming communities. It has to consider the environmental stewardship responsibility that farmers have for looking after the land. And it also has to consider ethics, which for us includes both animal welfare and worker welfare, as well as the socio-cultural dimensions of livestock production. And so you'll find that a lot of sustainability definitions don't actually include animal welfare, they don't really include animals, but with our 3's framework we've definitely taken into consideration animal welfare. And a really fantastic example that we always roll out for these things is our sort of flagship project, I suppose, at FAI. And about 10 years ago now, we partnered with DEFRA, with Oxford University, and one of our biggest commercial clients at the time. And we looked at free-range egg production. And back then, about 10 years ago, free-range egg production would look like a patch of land, fairly barren actually, with a shed on it, with plenty of potholes for the birds to get out and explore their environment. But what we found in practice is that many of those birds don't actually feel confident enough to explore their environment. They don't use those potholes, and you find that only a certain bird will use the full range to their full ability. And so what we thought is we've got to look at a way of actually better utilising this system and improving this system for birds as well as potentially the environment. And actually, if you look at the domestic laying hen, you'll find that its ancestors are actually jungle fowl. So they're obviously sort of used to tree-based environments. So what we did is we ran a randomised control trial on the FAI farm in Oxford to compare the production as well as the welfare of chickens, both in planted up plots as well as unplanted plots. And the results were pretty staggering, really. We found that statistically, the birds that had access to trees on the range had lower mortality, as well as produced better quality eggs, quite simply. So we found a statistical difference in the number of egg seconds, which are those eggs which we can only sell for less money. And so automatically we've got economic benefits as well as benefits to bird welfare. Birds were basically healthier. And as a result of that study, the impact on the industry was massive. And what we found is that our commercial partner immediately changed their sourcing policy, and all of the eggs that supplied that fast food chain suddenly had to be planting 5% tree cover on the range for those chickens. And following that, the industry moved. When you get one big player changing their policy, you get a pull through the whole industry. And we find now that 44% of all shell eggs sold in the UK are raised in enriched free-range systems, which means they've got trees on the range, which obviously is again great for the economics for the farmer, great for bird welfare, and fantastic for the environment, because we all know that trees represent carbon sequestration, greater biodiversity, less soil erosion, better drainage, etc. So we've got huge value in this project, and we've got a 3 E's impact. So it's a really good case study for the sort of work that we're constantly seeking to perform. So a little bit about sort of what we can all do in terms of our own personal ethics, I suppose, and also how we can buy better food and use our spending power for the better. Well, we know that we're all much more interested these days in artisan produce, local food, plant-based food, and foods that promote health and well-being. There's this concept that I quite like about the conscientious omnivore, and I think there's a lot of those in this room, people that do eat meat, and I'm included in that, but like to select good quality products from sources that we are confident in which animals get a good deal, as well as the farmers get a good deal too. So conscientious omnivores are what we're looking for, and we know that 2/3 of the world's consumers are looking for big changes in the way our food is produced. So we're at a really exciting point in time. And I think what everybody could take away as well from this is perhaps the message that we all need to upskill ourselves, all need to educate ourselves a little bit more on the food that's on our plate. And it's a complicated world out there. There's so many labels, so many words that can be quite baffling. But I'd really encourage you to take a bit of time to look, to explore, to question the standards of some of these brands and some of these labels. And we can't go through them all today, sadly. But we've got labels like the Red Tractor, which is British, and it assures a certain level of farming standards. We've got Pasture for Life, which assures that those animals, ruminants, usually sheep and cattle, are grazed for life on forage. We've got the Soil Association, one of a few organic logos, which give us various assurances about animal welfare as well as environmental stewardship on farms. We've obviously got the free-range egg, and I think probably most of us here are well sold into free-range eggs these days. And then finally, RSPCA Assured, which probably is the leading brand, I'd say, in terms of animal welfare. And so these are all brands to perhaps look out for and start exploring, doing a deep dive into what exactly they mean, so that your own personal ethics are reflected in your spending power. And that's about it from me. So yeah, if you can just take away the 3 E's from today, that would be a job well done for me.
Sorry, it's not done yet. I've got a bit more, but so I think what you've seen from Laura there is, you know, a sense of where FAI work. You know, on the food supply chain, it's this kind of, there's a number of touching points between producers to people that eat the stuff. Just iterating that from the people that produce it. We had a conversation about this. Depending where you are on the food supply chain, you call each other different names. So we, you know, very likely would be referred to as consumers. We had a conversation about are we citizens, you know, all this sort of thing. But I think what's really important is that wherever you are on that supply chain, you're a person and you're people, and that's something that we want to acknowledge. So from the people that produce to the people that provide access, to the people that create, to the people that enjoy and benefit from it. You know, so that's what we're doing by articulating this, is we're acknowledging that you can't just talk to one of those sets of people. You've got to talk through them all, and what you might find is that, say, somebody at the provision of access, which could be, say, a supermarket or something like that, they might say, oh well, we do it because the customers want it. You know, and that's an easy thing to say. I think what we understand and what we know is that we have got great examples of people that want to change things all along that. You know, and that's, I think, really it's about recognising that, as Laura said, this kind of notion of pull through, that if you can have a massive impact, then you're not just impacting your business, but you're impacting lots of businesses. So these are things that I think, in terms of our roles and how we work together, we're constantly thinking about this. Which then brings us to mess, which obviously everybody's got a copy of this on your tables. So mess kind of came about. As a design studio, we've always worked with this kind of notion of free press. We've always worked with this idea that, you know, how do you make something more valuable to people that don't know about it? Well, you've got to show it them, and you've got to do it in good faith, and you've got to meet them on their terms. So putting photography, arts photography, publications in pubs, in cafes, in places where they're going to be difficult to avoid, they're going to be eye-catching, they're going to be something that is going to get in their way. And we did an archive Sheffield, which was just before issue 1 of Mess came out, and we as a studio, what we do is we distribute, we kind of get here's 200 to you, here's 200 to you, you go down Exor Road, you go down that road, and we'll just put them in places. And on that particular weekend, my turn was Peddlers. So I came to Peddlers. I love it here, you know, the food, the drink, the atmosphere, all that sort of stuff's great. And I brought Pam and my 2 kids, and we were sat outside eating. I'd got this big stack of archive Sheffields. And I said to the 2 kids, I said, every time somebody gets up off a table, take one of these magazines and put it in their place. And so we just did it. And I know this was kind of, we didn't ask permission, which is a bit naughty, but we just tried it out. It was one of those things. And we were outside and we were watching as people were walking out with this quite brightly coloured document under their arms, and we were looking at them and we were thinking, actually, this is, you know, obviously what's going on in Peddlers is all these things that are for the senses, and there are people here that actually might be interested in other things that we have to say. So that was kind of the inspiration. And the Monday morning, I was straight into work, and I said to Alex, Alex, can you ring Heather, please, and find out if they'd be interested in working together? And thankfully, you know, that was a fairly quick conversation, and we ended up kind of collaborating on this project. Has everybody been to Peddlers? Yeah. If not, you've got to come down. So, why did we do it? You know, I suppose for us it's a bit of an experiment. It's something that we want to see if it's a way of helping talk to some of those people on that supply chain. So invite and create dialogue, invite and create collaboration, create community, engage audiences that are passionate about what they understand, brew, create, prepare, eat, drink and experience, join things up and interrupt. You know, I think that's the main thing, is that what we want to do is we want to have this work alongside an environment that's so vibrant with such a massive footfall, where people are happy, where people are engaged, and give them something that maybe they might take home, they might not read it straight away, but they might take home, they might look at it and just get something different from it. It's the beginning, you know, certainly for us, Mess it's on issue 2, so it's kind of something that is, we've got huge ambitions for this. You know, so just so everybody's kind of really kind of, it's a collaboration, you know, this kind of project can be nothing more than that. You know, we couldn't have done this without looking at Pedlar and thinking, you know, what they're doing is bringing people together. We've got a great production partner in SAP, in that they've got on board and supported us so much in terms of the print and the finishing on this. Believe me, it is not easy to fasten a diagonal cover onto a magazine. It is not. This is hand finishing, so it's sort of this is again comes back to why are we doing it? Because we want it to be different. We don't want it to sit next to lots of square things. We want it to sit there and be completely something that's odd, that makes you feel curious. And also we're getting kindly supported on stock by GF Smith Papers, who this kind of installation up here has been done by the students and tutors at Hallam University. So if nobody saw issue 1, it's sadly it's gone, but they're online. We've decided that as a kind of process that we pretty much going to do it as bi-monthly. We've got a page count. I think we started off with maybe 12 page count, got up to 16. We don't, you know, we need to make this sustain itself at the moment. It's a mixture of sweat and investment equity, so it's one of those things. As you see by the thing in front of you, we had a real kind of ambition to make it something that wasn't the usual kind of printed document material around this subject matter. And so issue 1, issue 2, we've mixed in. So our strategy, if you like, is that we don't just want this to be about the heavy stuff. We want it to be about the stuff that people like as well. We want it to be about the stuff to do with music, to do with art, to do with the people that are actually presenting the food to you, presenting the drinks to you. And it's about weaving in some of the narratives that Laura mentioned alongside, you know, these passionate people. So Florence Blanchard is obviously in this issue alongside Laura's piece. You know, I love the fact that we can put these things together alongside Matt and Jolie. So Matt's at the back from Sheffield Hallam University. This is a great pairing. So we're presenting seasonal produce in a slightly different way here. We've got Joe took rhubarb and wrote an article about it, and then Matt kind of came up all over the top of that with his custard FAI essays, which is, you know, it's just for us is exactly the right kind of narrative and the right kind of approach for how we see this kind of going. And then obviously it's not forgetting Pedlars itself and the traders. And what's been great about that is, again, we asked a question about, you know, do people care about where the food comes from? You know, we want the answer to be yes. We want people to come up to these stalls and say, where's that beef being sourced from? It's just not like that, you know. It's just, and it's understandable because, you know, people aren't necessarily coming here to think in that way. But what was really clear from talking to the traders is they care. You know, it doesn't really matter to them. Some of them, it doesn't matter to them whether the customers care. They care about their integrity in serving the product in the first place. And I think that's you know, it's a great example of showing how, again, along that food supply chain, and again, this is a document and a magazine for them as just as it's much for people that eat the food as well. So yeah, you know, that's where Mess is launched every bi-monthly at the Pedlars event. Following that, it then goes into the city, into the cafes, into the bars, into the galleries and stuff like that, and then, until it's gone. I think on the first issue, it went within maybe 1.5 weeks or something like that. So very good response, again, very good feedback from the city, very good feedback from the people that are kind of holding that in their spaces. And there's definitely an ambition to kind of engage more with that. So this is a bit of a close in this, really. Because I think this is the sort of human condition that we find ourselves with, and it's one I certainly kind of struggle with, is that life is kind of quite difficult, and life can be difficult because you've had a hard day at work, or because when you turn the news on, it's absolutely terrifying. And I think when you start to add some of this subject matter on top of that, it gets a little bit harder. And You know, how do we make engagement with these issues compelling? You know, I think that for me is the biggest question, and that is the question that Laura has to answer in terms of when she talks to her stakeholders, and I have to answer when I talk to you. You know, it's how do I make you stop what you're doing and engage differently, not in a way that you feel punished by it, but in a way that you feel interested by it. And the two things that I think are really important in this are desire and comfort, because for me they're kind of polar opposites. One's driven by energy, the other one's potentially driven by the fact that, you know, you just want to feel like everything's all right again, and that you've got in that. So I fancy a pizza, I fancy a burger, I should have salad for tea, or I could have lasagna for tea. You know, these are the questions that you ask yourself on a daily basis, and kind of interrupting that and stopping that from happening isn't easy, because I think it comes down to not just you, it comes down to what people provide you. So, for example, if the food that you could have that represented your desires or your comforts was produced in the manner that we've just been discussing, then you wouldn't have to worry too much about the decision you were making. And so these are the things that we're doing with the printed media, that we're doing with our language, that we're doing with our communication, that we're considering all the time. Now, back to Matt and Joe's essay about rhubarb and custard. This for me is a great analogy. At the last Peddlers, we had two things. We had sweets, and we had obviously we had the Mesh magazine. And Alex stood at the door with this box of sweets, probably about 100 bags. And we also stood there with these magazines as well. And people were coming in, and it said free sweets, free magazine. And people were coming in, picking the sweets up, ignoring the magazine. They didn't even ask us what was in the bag. They didn't say, can I eat this? Can I, what flavour is it? There was one person out of 100 that says, excuse me, have these been made in a nut-free environment? That was the only one. And everybody else was like, it was just complete desire. It was just complete sweets. Oh, rhubarb and custard, fantastic. And we did a tweet that day. It was something like, sugar wins over common sense. The media called it wrong yet again. And it's this whole thing of, for me, it's about how do we get more into that space? How do we get more into the space of desire when it comes to making money? How do we get more into the space of desire when it comes to making a good decision around your food? Or just how you produce your food? What we've got to do is we've got to tell good stories, we've got to encourage people that are doing well, and we've just got to find our own little ways of managing this stuff. So, yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks.